The Grassland Society of Southern Africa held their 58th conference here at the Omaramba Holiday Resort in Rustenburg from the 24th to the 28th of July. The Congress kicked off on the 24th with a field tour in one of the local resorts, and the Plaas media team attended that. For the rest of the week, we attended the conference and spoke to some very interesting role players in the industry. So, stay tuned. Yvette Brits is die voorsitter van die organiseringskomitee gewees vir hierdie jaar se Weiringsvereniging Kongres en ek gesels nou met haar om 'n bietjie terugvoer te kry hieroor. Yvette, vertel eers vir ons, hoe het hierdie jaar se kongres gegaan en wat was anders by hierdie jaar se kongres as laas jaar?
Hierdie jaar was 'n kongres in Noordwes gewees, soos wat julle nou al reeds weet. Dit was 'n baie lang tyd wat ons laas in Noordwes was. So ons was baie gelukkig om almal weer te verwelkom hierso. Wat hierdie jaar bietjie anders was, ons was 'n bietjie meer 'n kleiner groep gewees, maar dit was ook die International Grassland Kongres gewees in Amerika, in Kentucky. So baie van die befondsing het soontoe gegaan. 'n Ander rol wat ook gespeel het, is die befondsing ten opsigte van departementele instansies en ook akademiese instansies, wat maar bietjie in die hek byt hierdie jaar. Ten spyte van dit, was dit wel 'n groot sukses gewees, en wat ons wel ingebring het hierdie jaar is om bietjie aan die studente, bietjie meer, nie net die studente eintlik nie, maar kleiner projekte ook 'n bietjie groter blootstelling te gee, met 'n platform tipe presentation, of aanbieding dan nou, ekskuus vir die Engels daarso, dat hulle ook kan voel dit om voorgehoor te praat en dan voor te berei vir hulle groter aanbiedings wat hulle dan in hulle loopbaan dan sal hê.
En wat is volgende vir die vereniging en wat lê voor vir volgende jaar se kongres?
So op hierdie stadium is die kongres bietjie 'n verrassing en ten opsigte van waar dit aangebied gaan word. Wat ek wel net kan sê, en ek wil nou nie die lig steel van volgende jaar se kongres nie, maar binne in 2025 is dit ons 60ste jaar bestaan en dit sal dan in Natal plaasvind. So tussendeur sal ons dan nou weer 'n kongres reël vir volgende jaar, en wat ons ook dan nou wel dan nie net beoog om te doen, maar wat ons dan nou reeds reg gekry het, is dan om vir studente regtig blootstelling te gee tot die werksmark, en wat studente regtig raak gesien word en dan direk soos die Engels sê, headhunt word, om wel deel te word van maatskappye en so.
Baie dankie, Yvette. Ons sien uit om volgende jaar weer deel te wees van die kongres.
Dankie, Deidre. Ons is baie bly vir julle betrokkenheid by die kongres.
Daar het julle dit was nou Yvette Brits gewees.
My name is Althea Grunling. I'm the research team manager for water science, and I work for the Agricultural Research Council, Natural Resources and Engineering. So we started our wetland research work in the park in 2019, and it all started with a proposal that we wrote for the WRC, the Water Research Commission, and we got funding for a research project. And that was specifically to look at wetlands and how they would be influenced by climate change. So we had two study sites. The one was in Gatswani and the other one was in Eswatini. But they were similar systems, but the one is in a drier environment and the other one in a much wetter environment. And then we compared that with climate change projections to say if it's going to become wetter or if it's going to become drier, what would the impacts be on the wetlands? So you have to understand that we've got different types of wetlands in the country, and the peatlands form because they get groundwater and continuously groundwater fed systems. So they are permanently wet systems. In that environment, peat can accumulate, and peat is a buildup of organic material, and it doesn't break down because there's anaerobic conditions. And this happens over millions of years. But then you've got also seasonal systems or temporary systems, and those systems you don't get peat forming, but you also do get wetland, they're also part of the wetlands and they also function as wetlands, but it's temporary or seasonally. And in this one that we stand in now is called a seepage wetland. So in South Africa, we use the hydrogeomorphic classification system. And here you can see a hill slope seep. So it means that water is collected by rain and it seeps through the hill slope, and it can also be groundwater as well as surface water. And it's also important to preserve these seepage areas because they contribute to water that eventually goes downstream, and the big system is downstream. The main system, and that is the one where we get 6 meters of peat accumulation. So that's a big problem. And we've seen in South Africa the last years about 24 peat fires. So we do have peatlands, which is very unique systems, but when they dry out, it means that the water table drops. Whatever reason, it could be water abstraction, could be drought. There's reasons why the water table drop. There could be land use activities in a catchment takes more water, so less water gets to the ecosystem. And when that happens, the peat dries out, so it forms cracks, and it dries out, and if there's anything like a veld fire, that peat can start to burn, but it means it burns subsurface, and it means it can burn for many months. And you can only detect that when you smell the peat that's burning, and if you can see in the early morning some smoke coming out. In the daytime, it's very difficult, and if there's rain and you can get vegetation cover again, you don't realize that beneath the surface, it's actually smoldering, and it's very, very dangerous. Even I've seen cattle walking, they want to go and graze, but then they collapse in this burning peat, and they die. So even for people that live around a burning peatland, in Onrus, there's an example in the Western Cape where people had to evacuate because they couldn't breathe, so because of the pollution. And what the other loss is, we lose the carbon because the peat stores carbon and it also stores water. And if you lose the peat, you lose the carbon, which goes back into the atmosphere, so it's greenhouse gas emissions. And you also lose the water storing capacity. So in the northern hemisphere, the peat that's formed there is formed by sphagnum. But in our peat, it's formed by Phragmites reeds, or it's formed by sedges. But the sphagnum that we find here growing on the seepage area is because of the low nutrients in the water. So it's also a very important component to store water. So I'm just going to show you, if I press the water out, you can clearly see the amount of water that's stored within this plant. And obviously when it's dry, and it can absorb water again. So the problem is with disturbance. And what you can see behind you is the bracken fern. And even if there's trampling or overgrazing, you can disturb the seepage area. So it's just important to note that it's a sensitive area and it needs to be managed.
Ja, Grassland is 'n park wat nou al amper 50 jaar oud is. Hy's in die 70er jare as hy begin, en dit is hoofsaaklik gewees as gevolg van hierdie vlei-land wat hier bo-op is. Dit is 'n baie unieke vlei-land. Dit is die enigste van sy soort bo-op die Magaliesberg. En soos julle kan sien, hierdie basin wat hier waar binne in die vlei-land geleë is absoluut uniek in die bergreeks. So die park was dan begin om spesifiek te kyk na die bewaring van hierdie vlei-land. Hierdie water wat hierso ontgin word, gaan speel 'n baie belangrike rol in die ekonomie van Rustenburg en die landbou hier buitekant. En hierdie water loop natuurlik al die pad tot by Valkoopdam en al die besproeiingsboere wat daarvan afhanklik is. So suiwer uit 'n bewaring van hierdie vlei-land was hierdie park dan begin, en dit is ook een van ons grootste doelwitte in die bestuur van die plek. Wel, kyk, die Magaliesberg is maar van kwartsiet, en kwartsiet is baie poreus. So, een van die unieke eienskappe van die Magaliesberg is dat enige reënval op so word relatief baie vinnig opgeneem deur hierdie kliplaag, en dan beweeg die water deur die kliplaag tot by wat ons noem 'n beperkende laag, en dan beweeg dit dan teen die helling af en dan ontgin dit, of dan kom dit uit in hierdie seepage points op die voet van die berg, of op die voet van die hange. En hierdie water kom natuurlik nou deur baie lae van kwartsiet, wat dit natuurlik baie skoon, suiwer en pristien maak. En dan hierdie vlei land is ook al heel baie oud. Dit is nou natuurlik oor honderde en ewen duisende jare wat dit ontwikkel het. En so dit is 'n redelike stabiele vlei land. So hierdie vlei land produseer water reg deur die jaar. Selfs in die droogste tye wat ons hierso gehad het, het die vlei land altyd het die water altyd hierso afgeloop. So in daai opsig is dit baie belangrik dat ons moet seker maak dat die integriteit van die vlei land en natuurlik die plante groei rondom dit wat daarmee geassosieer is, dat dit in stand gehou word.